Hello guys, Johnny here, and in this video we're going to be focusing on the Eddie Thawne is Savitar theory, and we're not going to talk about the theory, we're going to talk about why it can't be possible. I will use some evidence from the show to support it, to see other people's point of view as to how they came to that conclusion, and then I will use evidence from the show to say why it can't be possible, why it was debunked by the show itself. So let's get started with why this theory could be possible. Alright, so Eddie Thawne is the character that this theory focuses on. Basically what this theory states is that when Eddie Thawne was killed himself in Season 1, Episode 23, titled Fast Enough, at the end of Season 1, he didn't die. The theory videos that I've watched, basically what they state and basically argue is he didn't die. When he got sucked into the singularity, he ended up on a different Earth, or he ended up somehow getting into the Speed Force. These the theories vary, but basically that's what the theory states. Now let's get into why this could be a possibility. Alright, so first piece of evidence would be in Season 3, Episode 9, titled The Present, when Barry is talking to Savitar through Julian for the first time ever. Barry asks Savitar, "What do you want from us?" Savitar responds by saying, "Everything you took from me, I want it back, and I'm going to take it back." Now, with that being said, I've heard a lot of videos where the argument basically that's made is that although Eddie did sacrifice himself to save the team, he ended up losing everything in the process. He lost Iris to Barry, not right away, but eventually he lost Iris to Barry. He lost Joe, who would have been his father-in-law. He lost the Team Flash. He lost, he was a detective, a very good detective, if that, and he lost everything. And maybe some have made the argument that maybe that's what he's referring to when he says, "I want it back, and I'm going to take it back." So next, in Season 3, Episode 15, The Wrath of Savitar, we see that Barry is talking once again to Savitar through Julian, and he asks Savitar, "How long have you been imprisoned?" Savitar responds to Barry by telling him that he's been imprisoned long enough to lose his mind several times over, and that his will is the only thing that keeps him on the side of sanity. Now, with this, I've seen a lot of different types of arguments made. I think the strongest argument that could be made from this is that Eddie, if Savitar is Eddie is referring to, since he was killed, or since he died in Season 1, Episode 23, and now when this happens, we're on Season 3, Episode 15, one could make the argument that it's been an eternity, because it's been forever, because we all know this by now, but he's actually trapped in the Speed Force, and what the Speed Force is just an endless loop of space and time. There's no measuring it. You could be gone for years to you, but technically it's been seconds in the real world, because it's the Speed Force. It's what speedsters use to time travel, so technically speaking, when you do escape the Speed Force, you can escape the Speed Force to any point in time you want. So that's the argument that I've heard made about this certain part of the conversation that they have with Savitar. So after that, Barry follows by asking Savitar, "You want to tell me why we're enemies?" Savitar responds to Barry by telling him, "Because we had to be. Only one of us could live." And then he says, "You thought that Thawne and Zoom were your biggest foes, but it's me, Barry. It's always been me." Now, with this, one could make the argument that what he's referring to is the scene in Season 1, Episode 23, where Thawne is about to kill Barry, literally seconds away from killing Barry. And at that same instant, that's when Eddie decides to shoot himself in order to kill Thawne in the process, because he knows that that's his ancestor from the future. So by killing himself, then he would stop him from ever being born. So, I've heard this in one video. I haven't heard it very often, but I've heard it in one video where this guy said that basically the argument that he was making is that what Savitar's trying to say by that is, well, if I hadn't shot myself, you would be dead, and I would have lived. And then since I did shoot myself, I died and you lived. So that's what he's referring to when he says only one of us could live. It's a little iffy, it's not very clear. It's kind of vague, but it is an argument that could be made in this case. So after that, Iris interrupts Savitar and tells him, "Man, do you love to hear yourself talk?" Savitar responds to Iris by telling her, "Iris, trying to show that you're not afraid of the future," is what he's referring to. And then he follows by telling her, "But I know you are, and I'm sorry you have to die, but it's you or me." Now, this part is actually it could go both ways. I've seen an argument made in both ways. So the part where he says, "I'm sorry you have to die," a lot of people have made this argument that even though, like Savitar said, he did lose his mind several times over being trapped in the Speed Force, his feelings for Iris still stand. He does still love her, because in season 1, well, like 2 episodes before he killed himself in episode 23, he had just asked Iris to marry him. Or he was about to. I'm not sure if he did or if he didn't. I think Thawne abducted him before he got a chance to. But yeah, so he did really love Iris, and we know that. So that's one argument that people have made. He's apologizing to her because even though he wants Barry to suffer and he wants him to lose everything like he did, he does still love Iris. So that's why he apologized to her. Now, the part where he says it's you or me, I've never really made a connection to that. To me, that's one of the reasons why it just doesn't make sense to me that it would be Eddie, just for the simple fact that it wouldn't make sense. Even if Eddie would have lived, it just doesn't make sense. It's you or me, because if Eddie would have lived, they would have still both been alive. So, it's one of those things where it's kind of iffy. It could go both ways. I've heard the first argument, and it could make sense because it does actually connect a few dots. But as far as the other part's concerned, it doesn't really make sense to me. So for the last piece of evidence, we have a picture of what's supposed to be Savitar holding the Philosopher's Stone up. And this is a shot that we see in Season 3, Episode 9, The Present, when Jay Garrick is explaining to Barry about the legends and myths that he's heard about Savitar, and we see this picture. Now, a lot of people have made the connection that the hairstyle and the back profile of this picture looks similar to Eddie Thawne. And I have to say it does look a little bit similar, but I've also made the connection that it could be the back of Julian's head as well, because Julian does have that same sort of hairstyle, kind of baggy, but not too baggy. So, and come on, let's be honest. How many characters in The Flash have that kind of hairstyle and hair color and kind of back profile? It's not uncommon, but I can see why people would make that argument. So that's it's a good argument. It's an argument. So it's possible. All right, so that's actually going to do it for the evidence that would support the theory that Eddie Thawne is Savitar. Now, before we get into the part that doesn't support the theory, I just wanted to say something real quick. This isn't all of the evidence that I've seen in other videos about why Eddie Thawne could become Savitar or is Savitar. This is just the evidence that makes sense. As far as logic and reason is concerned, this is the only evidence that makes sense. I know a lot of you are thinking, oh, it's the Flash. Logic and reason get thrown out the window the moment Barry time travels or anyone time travels. And you're right. That's true. But even in that case, there's a certain line that that we have to understand that producers just won't cross. And that's the line of resurrecting characters for a one-hit wonder. I don't see the show producers resurrecting Eddie Thawne for the simple fact of making him the bad guy. I just don't, because Eddie Thawne went out as a hero. He went out, he sacrificed, he gave up his life. He gave up his entire future. Anything that he could have done in the future, he gave it all up to save the team. And that actually helped cement the team to what it is now, Team Flash. At first they were all working together, but they weren't really a team. It was kind of shifty. Now, ever since Eddie Thawne sacrificed himself, they all came together and said, you know what? If Eddie Thawne is willing to give up his life, his future, to save us, then, it's gotta mean something. We have to make something out of it. We have to do good out of it. I just don't. That's why I don't see the producers going that route. If they do, I would love to. I would love it to if it was executed almost to perfection. If they don't, that would be even better. I just don't personally don't want that to happen. But if it does, then that'd be great. As long as they execute it well, I would be satisfied. Now let's talk about the reasons why the evidence doesn't support this theory about Eddie Thawne being Savitar. So the first piece of evidence, and more importantly, the most important piece of evidence to support Eddie not being Savitar is that in season 2, episode 17, flashback, when Barry went back in time a whole year to talk to Eobard Thawne about the speed equation and all that. Eddie had a chance to talk to, Barry had a chance to talk to Eddie, and he had him do a video for Iris. And basically, in this video, what Eddie tells Iris is that he loves her so much that all he wants for her is to just be happy. He even goes out and states that it doesn't have to be with him. All he's ever wanted is for her to be happy. So, when you take that into account, and then you take into account what I was saying earlier about how Barry took everything from him, it just doesn't add up. Eddie wouldn't say that if he didn't mean it. So I think that this is just kind of like proving that it's not Eddie, because Eddie just wanted Iris to be happy, whether it was with him or Barry or the editor that she was going on a date with. It doesn't matter. Eddie just wanted her to be happy. So, next piece of evidence to debunk this theory happens in Season 1, Episode 23, titled Fast Enough. And I've talked about this earlier, but let's get into the actual details of it. So, in this episode, in order to save Barry and save Iris and the rest of the team, Eddie Thawne makes the decision to kill himself. Now, like I said earlier, a lot of people have made the argument that, maybe he wasn't dead, maybe he didn't die when he went to the singularity, he got sent to a different Earth, maybe they have better technology that saved him, I don't know. But whatever argument you can really make, I personally think he did die. I mean, if you look at the exact section of where he wounded himself, or where he shot himself in the heart. You could argue that he shot himself in the chest near the heart, regardless of the situation. It's close to a big artery. He's human. He's not a speedster. Even if he was a speedster, that would probably kill him or hurt him very badly, and eventually he would die of bleeding out. Regardless of the argument, I think that he's dead. I mean, when he gets sucked into the singularity, he's already dead. He's not breathing anymore. And we know that because once he's dead, Eobard Thawne disappears. Eobard Thawne wouldn't have disintegrated into thin air and been erased from existence if Eddie was still alive. So that's basically the argument here. One thing can't happen without the other. So if Eddie was still alive, for whatever reason, miracle, whatever you want to call it, then that would mean Eobard Thawne would not be erased from existence. And then in Legends of Tomorrow Season 2, the Black Flash wouldn't be chasing him, trying to get him to kill him, so he stops messing with the timeline. So that's really the argument here. I think that Eddie is dead. Eddie seems to be dead before the singularity even sucks him into whatever it is, the singularity. So, I mean, I've heard people say, well, maybe the bullet bounced off one of his ribs or something. That sounds really... No, it just doesn't... It doesn't even sound possible. So I'm just going to completely ignore that argument. I think that he's dead. I think that it helped the show be what it is now, letting him die, letting him sacrifice himself to save the team. So I think that if the producers did go through that route and decide, he didn't die, he's still alive, but he became the bad guy, it would honestly make me upset, and I know it would make a lot of other fans upset, just because I think that when Eddie killed himself, it really showed true character. It really showed a hero, and he even says it before he dies, I guess I'm a hero. I'm your hero, when he's talking to Iris, so he died a hero. If the show producers decided to not go that route and bring him back as Savitar, it would honestly make me upset, because ever since season 1 when he died, I've always respected him for what he did. To me, in my eyes, he was the hero that day. So that's one of the reasons I don't think that Eddie Thawne is Savitar, and I don't think Eddie Thawne is alive. All right, so for our last piece of evidence to debunk this theory is from season 3, episode 16, titled "Into the Speed Force." In this episode, the whole premise of this episode is basically the Speed Force is trying to teach Barry a lesson. Barry initially goes into the Speed Force to get Wally out, but the Speed Force has other plans for him, trying to teach him a lesson. And what that lesson is, briefly, I'm just going to briefly tell you what that lesson is that lesson is that when Eddie Thawne, Ronnie Raymond, and later Leonard Snart, even though Leonard didn't do it for Barry, he did it because of Barry. The whole premise was, they sacrificed themselves for the greater good. They learned from you. They learned that you don't have to have powers to be a hero. You don't have to be the Flash to save the day, okay? That's basically what the whole premise of this lesson they were trying to teach him was. And the reason they did that was because Barry was trying to change the future by, changing certain events in the future that would lead to the future, and then asking Wally to save Iris, telling him that he had to be the one to save Iris, giving him that burden, even though it was Barry's own burden to bear. So the reason that I don't think that it is Eddie Thawne is because, first of all, the Speed Force knows who Savitar is. The Speed Force knows who Savitar is. I mean, Savitar, he has the Speed Force within him. He is a speedster. Anybody who is a speedster obviously uses the energy or the power energy from the Speed Force itself. So the Speed Force knows who Savitar is. Just because they don't tell Barry who it is doesn't mean that they don't know. They don't mention it, but they do in fact know who Savitar is. My argument here is the Speed Force wouldn't use Eddie Thawne. Okay, let's say that Eddie Thawne is Savitar. The Speed Force wouldn't use Eddie Thawne as a figure to teach Barry a lesson, just because it wouldn't make sense. Why would you use Savitar's self, like the person under the suit, to teach Barry a lesson, even though Barry doesn't know this yet? Why would you do that? That doesn't even make sense. Why not just use somebody else, And another thing is, Eddie sacrificed himself. Nobody forced him to shoot himself and kill himself and eventually erase Thawne from existence. Nobody told him to do that. No one, not one person. There wasn't even anyone around him. He made that decision all on his own. He sacrificed himself for the greater good. So that's basically my argument. The Speed Force would not use Eddie Thawne, or would not embody Eddie Thawne to teach Barry a lesson about sacrifice and about being the hero if Savitar was Eddie Thawne and Savitar is the villain. It just doesn't make sense. There's like a little paradox there that just doesn't make sense. And another thing is I just don't think the writers and the producers would go that route. It just doesn't make any sense. So that's the evidence that I have to slightly support the theory of why Eddie Thawne could be Savitar, and then to debunk the theory that Eddie Thawne can't or isn't Savitar. Some of you will agree with me, some of you won't. That's totally fine. I'd love to hear your comments in the comments section. If I missed something on here, it's probably because it doesn't really make sense or it doesn't really connect to anything. But if I did miss something, please let me know in the comment sections. In the comment section, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. That's gonna be it for this video. I will just make a little side note though. I don't know if I said this in any of my other videos yet, but I honestly wouldn't be upset or mad or anything like that if Eddie Thawne did turn out to be Savitar. I would accept the challenge because it would make me want to go back and watch every single season until I figured it out myself. I know that they're gonna, if it turns out that Eddie is Savitar in the end, when they reveal it, they'll probably give you a little episode or maybe half of an episode where they give you flashbacks and stuff about how it happened, how it all went down. So I won't have to do that, but I myself would want to go back and check it out. I honestly don't think that Eddie Thawne is Savitar. I don't see it happening. I feel like it would hurt the show more than it would help it, regardless of how they execute it, just because Eddie Thawne is a hero. He's, in the eyes of any Flash fan, anybody who's watched The Flash from the beginning, he is a hero. And he died a hero, and I would love it if they kept him dead as a hero because he means so much to the storyline. If they choose not to do that, that's totally fine, but I would, like I said, be a little confused, and I would want them to explain it almost perfectly so that I don't have any questions at the end of it. Once again, thanks guys for watching my video. If you like what you see and you want to see some more videos like this, give me a like and a subscription, and I'll be getting out some more videos for you guys tonight. Thanks.